The blood on my forehead had dried cold, but his whispers cut deeper. My husband of 10 years stroked my hair while planning my federal prison sentence with his accomplice. They assumed the scaffolding collapse left me in a deep coma, a broken puppet whose usefulness had expired. They had no idea my thumb was already moving across a dimmed screen in the dark, texting my lawyer. The countdown to their destruction began right now. Hello to the wonderful audience of Zoe Revenge Stories, and thank you so much for tuning in today. Unfortunately, YouTube has completely disabled monetization on our channel, leaving us without the budget needed to keep running. If you enjoyed today's story, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking team to cover their living expenses and continue creating these amazing stories for you. You can donate by scanning the PayPal QR code on your screen or by clicking the PayPal link in the description or the pinned comment. My name is Riley Cunningham, and I am 34 years old. Consciousness returned not as a sudden awakening, but as a violent tearing sensation inside my chest. Every breath felt like inhaling shattered glass. The sharp, sterile stench of rubbing alcohol burned my nostrils, overpowering the familiar scent of damp concrete and freshly turned Seattle soil that usually clung to my clothes. My eyelids felt like they were sewn shut, weighed down by crusting blood and fine dust. I remembered the sickening crack of metal, the sudden drop in my stomach, and the deafening crash of the scaffolding giving way at the Icarus Development's Eco City site, the architectural firm I built entirely from the ground up. I lay there, trapped in the crushing darkness of my own heavy eyelids, desperately trying to map out the injuries across my body without making a single sound. The cot beneath me was rigid, the thin paper sheet crinkling slightly against my dust-caked jacket. I was inside the temporary field medical tent on the construction site. The air was suffocatingly hot, stagnant, and thick with the metallic smell of iodine and my own blood. I tried to force my eyes open, to call out for help, but my entire body froze as a sound pierced the heavy silence. A low, rhythmic murmur drifted through the slight opening of the tent flap. It was him, Julian, my charming, endlessly devoted husband, the man who kissed my forehead every single morning before I left for the site. And right beside him, answering in hushed, hurried tones, was Claire, my best friend since college, my confidant, and my most trusted business partner at Icarus. Relief initially washed over my bruised ribs. They were here. I was safe. But that fragile relief violently shattered into a million jagged pieces when Julian let out a soft, chilling laugh. There was no panic in his voice, no desperate pleas for the paramedics to save his wife. Instead, his tone dripped with an icy, calculating amusement that I had never heard in our entire 10 years of marriage. "The amount of sedatives mixed into her water bottle is enough to keep her asleep until tomorrow morning," Julian whispered, his words striking my eardrums like a physical blow. "Is the accident inspection report fixed yet?" A cold sweat broke out across the nape of my neck. Sedatives, my water bottle. The scaffolding collapse was not a tragic occupational hazard. It was an execution. "It is handled," Claire replied, her voice completely stripped of the warmth I had known for over a decade. It was mechanical, razor-sharp, and brimming with greed. "We are not just taking her blueprints to sell to the rival corporation for hundreds of millions of dollars. When the federal investigators look into the collapse, they will find the fabricated ledgers I planted. They will think Riley has been embezzling construction materials for the past 8 months. She will be facing federal prison. If she wakes up, she will be locked away. If she does not, she goes down as a disgraced architect." My heart slammed against my ribcage like a trapped bird. The shock paralyzing my limbs was rapidly replaced by a terrifying, absolute clarity. This was not a nightmare. The two people I loved most in this world had conspired to murder me, steal my life's work, and destroy my legacy to cover their tracks. They wanted me dead or caged. They thought I was nothing but a blind, broken puppet who had outlived her usefulness. A cold, agonizing fury began to pump through my veins, numbing the physical pain in my chest. I kept my breathing terrifyingly slow, perfectly shallow. I could not let the sheet rustle. I could not let my pulse monitor spike. In the suffocatingly tight space of the medical cot, I used the blind spot created by the heavy canvas wall to my advantage. I slowly, agonizingly slipped my bruised right hand down the side of my hip, digging my trembling fingers into the deep pocket of my work jacket. Every millimeter of movement sent shockwaves of agony through my collarbone, but the rage burning in my chest was stronger than the pain. My fingertips brushed the cold glass of my phone. I carefully maneuvered it out of my pocket, keeping it pressed flush against my thigh under the blanket, relying purely on muscle memory. I unlocked the screen and immediately dragged the brightness slider down to absolute 0. The dim glow was practically invisible in the shadowy corner of the tent. My hands shook violently as I opened my secure messaging app. I selected the contact for Marcus Vance, my personal lawyer and a notoriously ruthless former federal prosecutor. I typed a message using only the very tip of my thumb, ensuring no tapping sounds escaped my hiding place. Protocol number 4. Start right now. Do not call back. I hit send. My eyes stared at the pitch-black screen. Exactly 2 seconds later, the tiny notification chimed silently, displaying a single word: read. The heavy canvas flap of the medical tent rustled, instantly followed by the sound of hurried footsteps. I shoved my phone deeper into my pocket, letting my hand fall limp over the edge of the cot. The performance of my life had to begin right now. I commanded my muscles to relax, letting a pained, disoriented groan slip past my lips as I forced my eyes to flutter open. The harsh overhead fluorescent light blinded me, but through the squinting blur, I saw them rushing toward my bed. Oh my God. Riley. Baby. You are awake. Julian threw himself onto the edge of the mattress, his hands desperately grabbing my face. His eyes were wide, brimming with tears that spilled perfectly down his cheeks. He pressed his forehead against mine, his voice trembling with a masterfully crafted blend of terror and relief. I thought I lost you. I was so terrified. The scaffolding just gave way. His touch, which had brought me comfort for a decade, now felt like venom seeping into my pores. But I leaned into his palm, masking my revulsion behind a facade of sheer physical agony. Julian, I whispered, letting my voice crack perfectly. My chest hurt so much. What happened? I cannot remember anything. I was looking at the structural supports, and then there was just dust. Do not try to remember, sweetie. You took a terrible hit to the head. You are safe now. I am right here, Julian murmured, kissing my temple right over the spot where the dried blood had crusted. His performance was flawless. He was the picture-perfect, devastated husband clinging to his fragile wife. From the other side of the cot, a soft, reassuring hand wrapped around my cold fingers. Claire. She leaned into my line of sight, her eyes soft and full of practiced sympathy. We were so scared. Riley, she said, her voice dripping with artificial warmth. The paramedics said you have a mild concussion and 2 fractured ribs. You just need to rest. Do not worry about a single thing at the company. I am going to step in and handle all the site inspections and client meetings. I have got everything completely under control so you can focus entirely on healing. I looked at my best friend, squeezing her hand back with exactly the right amount of weak gratitude. Thank you. Claire, I do not know what I would do without you both. The irony tasted like ash in my mouth. I knew exactly what they were going to do. They were going to strip my company bare and let me take the fall. 12 hours later, the theatrical display of marital devotion continued in the primary bedroom of our Seattle home. Julian had insisted on carrying me up the stairs, tucking me into our bed with agonizing care before finally succumbing to his own exhaustion. Beside me, his breathing leveled out into a deep, rhythmic snore. I waited another 20 minutes, staring at the shadows dancing on the ceiling, ensuring he was entirely unconscious. Slowly, painstakingly, I slid out from under the duvet. My ribs ached sharply with every millimeter of movement, but I clenched my jaw tight to keep from making a sound. I slipped into the master bathroom, softly clicking the lock into place. I turned the shower handle to full blast, letting the rush of the hot water mask any potential noise, and then I sat on the cold tile floor. I pulled out my phone and accepted the incoming encrypted audio call from Marcus. His voice came through the speaker crisp, professional, and devoid of any unnecessary pleasantries. "Riley, I ran the background checks on the financial vectors you suspected," Marcus began, his tone serious. "Your instincts were right, but the reality is much worse. Julian does not have the massive venture capital portfolio he has been bragging about for the last 5 years. It is all a fabricated front. He is drowning." "How deep?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper over the sound of the running shower. "Over $5 million, Marcus replied smoothly. "And he does not owe it to a bank. He is in debt to a very violent, highly organized, illicit lending syndicate based out of Chicago. They are calling in his markers by the end of the month. Your EcoCity blueprint is his only leverage. He intends to fence your proprietary designs to that rival development firm to clear his ledger." I absorbed the blow. $5 million. My husband was willing to trade my freedom and my life to save his own skin from loan sharks. "And Claire?" I asked, bracing myself for the confirmation of an affair. "That is the fascinating part," Marcus said. "I scrubbed their communications and travel logs. They are not sleeping together. There is absolutely no romantic entanglement. They are strictly business partners, bound together by a colossal failure. 3 years ago, they secretly co-invested in a shadow real estate venture that went completely bankrupt. Claire is just as desperate for cash as Julian is. They are accomplices in a desperate cash grab. Nothing more." A dark, terrifyingly calm smile spread across my face in the humid bathroom. If they were acting entirely out of financial desperation rather than passion, it made them predictable. It made them manipulatable. "Do we strike now?" Marcus asked. "I can have the authorities waiting at the office tomorrow morning based on the embezzlement framing attempt." "No," I replied, my voice steady and completely devoid of emotion. "Apprehending them now only pins them for attempted fraud. They will hire top-tier lawyers and plead ignorance. I want them to be the architects of their own undoing. I need you to construct a digital labyrinth on our company servers." "A maze?" Marcus inquired, intrigued. "Create a shadow virtual server," I instructed. "Clone the entire EcoCity blueprint database, but alter the core structural algorithms just enough so the files look authentic but are completely useless when they inevitably try to steal the master files to sell to the rival firm. I want them stealing the fake data. We are going to let them commit undeniable, textbook economic espionage. I want them to steal the exact blueprints that will guarantee their absolute ruin." 4 days later, I walked through the sleek glass doors of Aetheris Developments. My right arm was tightly bound in a heavy fiberglass cast, and my posture was intentionally slouched. I had to look like a woman broken by trauma, a chief executive officer completely unfit to lead. I let my eyes dart around nervously, shrinking away from the sympathetic glances of my staff. When Claire rushed out of her corner office to greet me, I gave her a fragile, trembling smile, allowing her to guide me to my desk as if I were a lost child. "You should not be here, Riley," Claire chided gently, pouring me a cup of herbal tea. "I told you I have the board meetings handled for the next 3 weeks. You need to rest." "I just wanted to see my desk," I stammered, letting my voice shake. "I feel so disconnected, so useless." She patted my good shoulder, hiding the greedy glint in her eyes behind a mask of pity. "You are not useless. You are healing. Go home soon." "Okay." As soon as she left my office and the heavy door clicked shut, my trembling stopped immediately. My posture straightened. I pulled a small, velvet-lined box from my purse. Inside were 4 microcameras, each no larger than a shirt button. I moved with calculated precision, embedding the first lens into the intricate foliage of a miniature landscaping model sitting on my bookshelf. The second went into the ventilation grate directly above my desk. During the lunch hour, when Claire stepped out for a client meeting, I slipped into her office and planted the remaining 2 cameras. One went inside a hollowed-out binder on her top shelf, and the other I wedged beneath the heavy brass base of her desk lamp. From that moment on, I lived in a state of hypervigilance, constantly checking the live feeds on my encrypted secondary phone. Every smile I gave them, every tear I faked, was a masterclass in deception. I was dining with my executioners, playing the perfect, oblivious victim while the knife hovered right behind my back. The paranoia was a living, breathing thing in my chest, making my heart race every time the clock struck midnight. I spent my nights locked in my study at home, staring at the glowing screens of my surveillance feeds, while Julian supposedly slept in the room next door. On the 3rd night of my digital watch, the motion alert triggered. My breath hitched. The black and white night vision feed from my office flickered to life. The heavy oak door creaked open, and a tall, familiar silhouette slipped inside. Julian. He was moving with an eerie, practiced silence, bypassing the main security keypad because he had stolen my master override code. I watched, my stomach twisting in cold knots. As my husband sat in my leather chair, he pulled a silver flash drive from his jacket pocket and shoved it into the secure terminal. He was accessing the shadow server Marcus had set up, the one I had deliberately left vulnerable. The downloading progress bar reflected in Julian's eyes like a digital slot machine paying out his salvation. He was stealing the fake blueprints, thinking he was securing his $5 million payout. I was ready to celebrate the successful bait when my encrypted phone buzzed violently against the mahogany desk. It was Marcus. "We have a massive problem," Marcus said, and for the very first time since I had known him, his voice lacked its usual icy composure. They did not just download the files, Riley, they uploaded something back into the master directory. "What do you mean?" I demanded, my pulse hammering so loudly in my ears I could barely hear myself think. "What did they upload?" "I just ran a deep diagnostic on the root code of the files they modified," Marcus explained, his words coming fast and sharp. "They altered the core load-bearing algorithms for the entire EcoCity project. They intentionally weakened the structural integrity metrics for the subterranean foundation by 30%. Riley, if a contractor builds the city using these modified blueprints, the entire central complex will suffer a catastrophic collapse within the first 2 years of occupancy." The air vanished from my lungs. The room started to spin as the sheer gravity of his words hit me. "They are sabotaging the building." "Worse," Marcus corrected grimly, "because the modifications were uploaded using your personal administrative credentials from your dedicated terminal. The digital footprint leads directly back to you when that building collapses and kills hundreds of innocent people. Julian and Claire will be long gone with the rival company's payout. You will be the sole architect on record. You will be indicted for gross criminal negligence and mass manslaughter. You will go away for life." The sheer scale of their malevolence was staggering. They did not just want to steal my money and take my company. They wanted to turn my proudest architectural achievement into a mass grave and leave me buried under the legal rubble. They were willing to slaughter innocent families just to clear a gambling debt and line their own pockets. Any lingering trace of fear or hesitation inside me evaporated, replaced by a dark, metallic resolve. I did not panic. I did not cry. In that exact moment, the woman who had loved Julian died completely, and I became something entirely different. "Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register, "package the server logs, compile every second of the video footage of Julian in my office, gather every shred of forensic data linking their internet protocol addresses to the file modifications." "Are we going to the board of directors?" he asked. "No, we are going to the Federal Bureau of Investigation," I replied, my eyes locked on the frozen image of my treacherous husband on the monitor. "Call your old contacts in the Economic Crimes Division. Tell them we are wrapping a neat little bow around a massive case of corporate terrorism and criminal conspiracy. We are going to let them think they have won. We let them walk right up to the finish line, completely unchecked, and then we drop the guillotine." The crystal chandeliers of Le Vénitien cast a warm, golden glow over the immaculate white tablecloth, perfectly masking the Cold War raging right in front of me. I raised my glass of sparkling cider, my right arm still resting heavily in a custom sling, and smiled across the table at the man who was actively trying to destroy my life. It was our 10th wedding anniversary. To you, Julian, I said, my voice thick with feigned, overflowing emotion. For being my absolute rock, I truly do not think I could have survived the physical and mental agony of the last few weeks without you holding me together. Julian beamed, a sickeningly sweet, affectionate smile stretching across his handsome face. He reached out, his warm, impeccably manicured hand covering my cold one. I will always protect you, Riley. You know that, which is exactly why I have been thinking so much about your long-term recovery. He paused, expertly adopting a look of deep, loving concern, furrowing his brow just the right amount. The doctors were very clear that stress is your biggest enemy right now. Running Aetheris is a massive undertaking, a total monster, and it is eating you alive. I really think you need to step away. Not forever, of course, just for a year or two. We could go to Europe, the Amalfi Coast. Perhaps let the ocean air heal you while the company runs itself. But the Eco City project, I protested weakly, playing the part of the anxious, fiercely dedicated founder reluctant to let go. The final phases are so critical right now, I cannot just abandon my team. Claire can handle it, Julian urged smoothly, his thumb rubbing soothing circles on the back of my hand. She is brilliant, and she knows the project inside and out. Just grant her temporary executive authority. Let her carry the heavy stones while you rest and regain your strength. I let a long, heavy, agonizing silence stretch between us, pretending to wrestle with the monumental decision. Finally, I sighed, letting my shoulders slump in total defeat. You are right. I am just so incredibly tired. Julian. He practically vibrated with barely concealed excitement as he produced a sleek leather folder from his designer briefcase, sliding a meticulously prepared power of attorney document across the table. He even uncapped a solid gold fountain pen for me, presenting it like a gift. I read over the text, feigning a cursory, trusting glance, but I already knew every single word by heart. Marcus had secretly drafted this exact document 3 days ago, flawlessly replacing Julian and Claire's original version in his briefcase. Hidden within the dense, convoluted legal jargon of page 4 was a highly toxic liability clause. By signing this specific paper, I was legally transferring every ounce of accountability for the company's servers, data integrity, and compliance directly to Claire. From the moment my ink hit the paper, any data transfer, any unauthorized blueprint modification, and any subsequent corporate espionage became her sole, undeniable legal responsibility. I smiled softly, taking the pen and gracefully signing my name on the dotted line. The invisible trap snapped shut with a resounding finality. The very next morning, while Julian was out allegedly meeting with his phantom portfolio investors, I initiated the second phase of my demolition protocol. Using a secure, untraceable satellite line from my study, I completely bypassed the receptionists and connected directly to the private office of the Chief Executive Officer at Horizon Enterprises, the rival firm eagerly preparing to purchase my stolen blueprints. "Who is this?" the gruff, impatient voice demanded on the other end of the line. "This is Riley Cunningham," I stated, my tone razor-sharp and utterly commanding, "and I am calling to personally save your entire corporation from a massive federal indictment." There was a sharp, audible intake of breath on the line. "I have absolutely no idea what you are talking about. Miss Cunningham, this is highly inappropriate." "Do not insult my intelligence, and do not waste my time," I replied smoothly, leaning back in my chair. "I know exactly what Julian and Claire are offering you. They are trying to sell you the complete master files for the Aetheris Eco City project for a fraction of their actual market value. Buy them if you wish, but you should know right now that I have intentionally seeded those specific files with highly aggressive tracking malware and fatally modified the foundational structural codes. The absolute second you transfer those offshore funds and open those blueprints on your corporate network, you will be in possession of stolen intellectual property laced with a digital beacon transmitting directly to the Cybercrimes Division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You will not get a groundbreaking new architectural project. You will get a dawn raid, an immediate arrest warrant for receiving stolen corporate assets, and a guaranteed one-way ticket to a federal penitentiary. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with the crushing realization that they were blindly walking into a burning building. Consider this a rare professional courtesy, I added quietly. Withdraw your financial offer immediately. Cease all communications with my husband, and deny any knowledge of their existence. I hung up the phone before he could utter another syllable, mercilessly severing Julian's only financial lifeline to the criminal underworld. The climax of my private theater arrived the night before the massive project launch gala. I was sitting in my dimly lit living room, supposedly resting my fragile body, when the doorbell rang. It was Claire. She strolled in wearing a stunning designer trench coat, holding a bottle of an incredibly expensive vintage red wine. "I thought we could have a quiet little celebration," Claire chimed, her eyes gleaming with the intoxicating thrill of her impending victory. "Tomorrow night is going to be massive. Riley, you are officially handing over the reins to me on stage, and I wanted to toast to your new chapter of peace and relaxation." "You are far too sweet to me, Claire," I murmured, maintaining my fragile persona as I led her into the modern kitchen. She eagerly insisted on opening the bottle herself. I stood near the island and watched her reflection perfectly mirrored in the dark, polished glass of the oven door. As I turned my back to grab 2 large crystal wine glasses from the high overhead cabinet, I saw her hand hover quickly over one of the pours, a tiny, expert flick of her wrist, followed by the rapid dissolution of a fine white powder. She was trying to chemically sedate me again, likely to ensure I would be too groggy, confused, and docile to attend the gala and spot any glaring discrepancies in her public presentation. "Oh, I completely forgot the artisanal cheese platter in the fridge," I said, turning around with the glasses in hand. I set them down carefully on the cold granite island. "Could you grab it for me, Claire? My ribs are aching terribly today. It is hard to bend down." Claire smiled obligingly, playing the role of the attentive caretaker, and walked over to the large stainless steel refrigerator, the exact moment the heavy door swung open, completely blocking her line of sight. My hands moved with the terrifying speed and precision of a venomous strike. I seamlessly and silently swapped the position of the 2 crystal glasses on the counter. She returned with the platter a few seconds later, completely and utterly oblivious. We raised our glasses under the bright kitchen pendant lights. "To the brilliant future of Aetheris," Claire said, looking me right in the eye with a hidden, predatory grin. "To getting exactly what we deserve," I replied, maintaining unblinking, unbroken eye contact as I took a long, satisfying sip of the untainted wine. Claire confidently drained half her glass in one go. Within 20 short minutes, the lively conversation started to drag heavily. Her eyelids fluttered, fighting a losing battle against gravity, and her carefully articulated words began to slur into a messy drawl. "I think I am just exhausted from all the stressful gala preparation," she mumbled, swaying noticeably on her feet as she clumsily stood up to leave. As I graciously helped her slip into her coat, pretending to physically steady her swaying frame, I pressed a small, rectangular near-field communication scanner directly against the fabric of the pocket holding her smartphone. The advanced device vibrated silently against my palm, rapidly and completely cloning her entire local storage drive, including the highly encrypted message keys she used to communicate her illicit plans with Julian. "Drive safe, Claire," I whispered softly, standing on the porch and watching her stumble drunkenly out the front door and into the back seat of her waiting rideshare vehicle. She leaned her heavy head against the window, dreaming of a triumph she would never see. She had absolutely no idea she was leaving my house entirely empty-handed, while I was firmly holding the final, undeniable nail for her coffin. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel was a sea of glittering crystal, flashing camera lenses, and the low, wealthy hum of Seattle elite. Hundreds of private investors, prominent city officials, and top-tier media representatives had gathered for the highly anticipated launch of Project Genesis. The atmosphere was electric, completely saturated with the smell of expensive champagne and the intoxicating promise of architectural revolution. I sat quietly in the center of the front row, completely hidden in plain sight. I wore a heavy, dark velvet coat draped over my shoulders to conceal what lay beneath, maintaining the frail, broken posture they expected to see. A thunderous applause erupted as the house lights dimmed and the stage spotlights blazed to life. Julian and Claire walked out from the wings, moving with the synchronized, predatory grace of two sharks circling a wounded prey. Claire wore a stunning emerald gown, radiating capable authority, while Julian stepped up to the acrylic podium in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He adjusted the microphone, letting a heavy theatrical sigh echo through the massive speakers. He looked out at the audience, his handsome face contorted into a mask of profound, brave sorrow. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Julian began, his voice dropping an octave to convey a deeply manufactured emotional weight. Project Genesis was born from the brilliant, unparalleled mind of my beautiful wife, Riley, as many of you know. She recently suffered a devastating accident at the construction site. While her life was miraculously spared, the physical and psychological toll has been unimaginably severe. He paused perfectly, letting the crowd murmur their sympathies. It is with a heavy heart, but undeniable necessity, that Riley has decided to step down as the Chief Executive Officer of Aetherius Developments to focus entirely on her long-term medical recovery. Effective immediately, she has granted full executive authority to her most trusted partner, Claire. Claire stepped forward, placing a comforting, completely fake hand on Julian's shoulder. She offered the crowd a solemn, reassuring nod. "We will honor Riley by building her vision exactly as she intended." She lied flawlessly. Julian picked up the wireless presentation remote. "And now, I am incredibly honored to show you the final, breathtaking blueprints of the Genesis Eco-City." He pressed the button. He expected to see a dazzling three-dimensional rendering of the city center. He expected a standing ovation. He expected to secure his $5 million lifeline. Instead, the colossal LED screen spanning the entire back wall of the stage violently glitched. A harsh, ear-piercing burst of digital static ripped through the ballroom, causing several investors in the front rows to physically flinch and cover their ears. The screen went pitch black for exactly 2 seconds. Then, a massive, stark white waveform appeared in the center of the darkness. I sat perfectly still in my chair, my thumb pressing firmly against the execution command on the modified tablet resting in my lap. The pristine acoustics of the Fairmont Ballroom amplified the hidden audio recording, projecting it with terrifying, undeniable clarity. The amount of sedatives mixed into her water bottle is enough to keep her asleep until tomorrow morning. It was Julian's voice, cold, calculating, laughing in the shadows of the medical tent. A collective, horrified gasp sucked the air right out of the ballroom. On stage, Julian froze. The color drained from his face so rapidly, he looked like a wax figure melting under the intense stage lights. He desperately mashed the buttons on his remote, but the system was entirely locked under my overriding command. "Is the accident inspection report fixed yet?" Julian's recorded voice continued, echoing off the high, gilded ceiling. Then came Claire's voice, mechanical and brimming with greed. "It is handled. We are not just taking her blueprints to sell to the rival corporation for hundreds of millions of dollars. They will think Riley has been embezzling construction materials for the past 8 months. She will be facing federal prison. If she wakes up, she will be locked away. If she does not, she goes down as a disgraced architect." Pandemonium broke out. Flashbulbs exploded like a lightning storm. Reporters scrambled over chairs, shouting questions. The mayor of Seattle, seated 2 rows behind me, stood up in sheer outrage. The LED screen shifted again, The audio waveform vanished, replaced by massive, undeniable visual evidence. High-definition scans of Julian's illicit loan agreements with the Chicago Syndicate flashed across the screen in brutal red ink, displaying the exact $5 million debt. Beside it, the server logs appeared, highlighting the precise time and date Julian had used his stolen terminal access to download the project files. Claire began to physically tremble. The confident, capable successor was gone, replaced by a terrified, cornered rat. She spun around, hiking up her expensive gown, and bolted toward the stage right exit. Before she could even reach the curtain, 3 massive, broad-shouldered men in dark suits stepped out from the shadows, firmly blocking her path. I had hired a private tactical security firm to lock down every single door in the ballroom 30 minutes before the event began. There was absolutely no way out. I stood up. I let the heavy velvet coat slide completely off my shoulders, letting it fall into a careless heap on the floor. I was not wearing a sling. There was no cast on my arm. I was dressed in a razor-sharp, obsidian black power suit, my posture perfectly straight, my eyes burning with a lethal, unstoppable calm. The crowd parted automatically as I walked up the center aisle. The whispers died down, replaced by a stunned, electric silence. I climbed the short staircase to the stage, my heels clicking sharply against the polished wood. Julian watched me approach, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly, his eyes wide with the absolute terror of a man watching his executioner ascend the scaffold. I did not look at Claire, who was sobbing uncontrollably against the security blockade. I walked straight up to Julian. I reached out and calmly ripped the microphone right out of his paralyzed, sweaty hand. I turned my back on my husband and faced the hundreds of flashing cameras. "My name is Riley Cunningham," I said, my voice ringing out with an ironclad authority that commanded absolute attention. "And as the founder and sole rightful owner of Aetheris Developments, I am officially revoking all executive privileges, powers of attorney, and corporate access previously granted to Julian and Claire." I pointed a sharp, accusing finger at the massive screen behind me. The image shifted one final time, displaying the intricate, highly technical lines of the foundational blueprints. "What you are looking at is not just an act of corporate espionage," I declared, my voice echoing like a judge reading a death sentence. In their desperate, pathetic scramble to clear a $5 million gambling debt, these 2 individuals altered the core structural algorithms of the Genesis project. They intentionally weakened the load-bearing capacity of the subterranean foundation by 30%. Had this project gone to construction, the central tower would have collapsed within 2 years. They did not just try to steal my life's work. They conspired to build a mass grave, bury hundreds of innocent families in the rubble, and leave me to take the fall for mass manslaughter while they fled the country with their blood money. The ballroom erupted into sheer, unadulterated chaos. Investors screamed. City officials demanded answers. Julian finally snapped out of his paralysis, lunging toward me with a guttural, desperate yell. "Riley, stop. You have to listen to me." He never made it within 3 feet of me. The heavy, ornate double doors at the back of the ballroom burst open with a deafening crash. A dozen men and women wearing tactical vests boldly emblazoned with the bright yellow letters of the Federal Bureau of Investigation poured into the room, flanked by heavily armed officers from the Economic Crimes Division. "Federal agents, nobody move." The lead agent's voice boomed over a bullhorn, cutting through the chaos like a knife. The agents rushed down the aisle, storming the stage in seconds. 2 agents grabbed Julian, violently twisting his arms behind his back and slamming him face first onto the acrylic podium he had just been speaking from. Another team cornered Claire, who was screaming hysterically as they forced her to her knees, completely ruining her designer gown against the hard floor. "Julian and Claire," the lead agent barked, pulling a thick stack of warrants from his jacket. "You are both under arrest for grand larceny, corporate espionage, wire fraud, and criminal conspiracy to endanger public safety. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." The sharp, incredibly satisfying metallic click of heavy handcuffs snapping around Julian's wrists, echoed in the microphone I was still holding. I stepped forward, looking down at the man I had loved for a decade. His face was pressed hard against the podium, his cheek completely flattened, tears of absolute defeat streaming from his eyes. "You thought I was unconscious," I whispered softly, leaning down just enough so only he could hear me over the chaotic roar of the press. "But I heard every single word, and I designed this entirely for you." I turned away from the wreckage of my marriage, leaving them to be dragged off the stage and directly into the blinding barrage of 100 flashing cameras. The demolition was complete. The ground was finally clear. 6 months had passed since the earthquake that shattered my old reality. I sat comfortably in the sprawling, light-filled corner office of the newly relocated Aetheris Developments, gazing out through the immaculate floor-to-ceiling windows. The vibrant, bustling Seattle skyline stretched endlessly before me, perfectly framed by the towering steel skeletons of our upcoming projects. The air in the room felt entirely different now, stripped of the suffocating tension that used to choke my lungs. The federal trial had been remarkably swift. Faced with the staggering mountain of irrefutable digital evidence, the united front Julian and Claire once shared dissolved into pure, desperate cowardice. They immediately turned on each other like starving animals, hurling accusations and pointing fingers across the courtroom in a pathetic attempt to secure leniency. The presiding judge was completely unmoved by their theatrics, for his leading role in the conspiracy and financial fraud. Julian was sentenced to 15 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary. Claire, for her active complicity and attempt to compromise the structural safety of a public space, received a harsh sentence of 12 years behind bars, without a single possibility of early parole. The divorce proceedings were finalized with a cold, surgical precision. Marcus Vance proved exactly why he was the most feared attorney in the city. He utilized impenetrable asset protection clauses, many of which I had signed years ago, to legally sever Julian from every single dime of my personal wealth and my company shares. I stripped my former husband down to his absolute core, pushing him entirely out of my existence with empty hands and a colossal, unpayable debt to his underground creditors waiting for him the moment he stepped into his cell. Looking back at the wreckage, I finally understood the truth. Their vicious betrayal did not break me. Instead, it acted as a blazing, purifying furnace, melting away every lingering trace of blind trust and vulnerability I had harbored. It cleared the rot from my foundation, granting me the unparalleled opportunity to reconstruct my executive board from the ground up. Today, I am surrounded solely by colleagues forged in genuine loyalty and uncompromising professional integrity. Later that afternoon, I left the office and took a slow, solitary walk along the bustling waterfront. The classic, persistent Seattle drizzle misted the gray air, leaving tiny droplets on the collar of my wool coat. I stopped at the edge of the damp wooden pier, closing my eyes and pulling a deep, expanding breath of the freezing, salt-tinged wind into my healed chest. I searched my soul for any remaining traces of bitterness or grief, but found those chambers entirely empty. The heavy, dark weight of vengeance had washed away, leaving behind nothing but a profound, unshakable sense of quiet liberation. When someone tries to bury you alive, they foolishly forget that you are an architect, and to me, a massive pile of rubble is never the end of the story. It is simply the perfect, cleared ground required to build a much stronger fortress. Thank you so very much, from the bottom of my heart, for spending your time listening to my story today. I would absolutely love to know where in the world you are tuning in from, so please take a moment to let me know down in the comments. If you found my journey today compelling, please consider helping our channel with a donation of just $1. You can do this quickly by scanning the PayPal QR code displayed right on your screen, or by clicking the secure PayPal link provided in the video description and the pinned comment below. Your generous support is exactly what allows us to pay our incredibly hardworking production team, ensuring they can provide for their families and continue creating even better, more thrilling stories for you in the future. Stay safe, stay strong, And thank you once again for being such a wonderful audience.